more of the content of this specific work, what's the context around the exercise we'll be doing together, what are the key concepts, like key concepts such as public organization, public services, and information around, and then really ask ourselves, why are we here together? Why do we want to define those? And related to that, what are the use cases that we want to really achieve through this exercise? And from there, we'll also put you in practice, some brainstorm together around those use cases, and define together also what are interesting sources of information that we could use, because there is already a lot existing. And from there, that will be enough for today, and we'll quickly wrap up with the timeline and the next steps. And some small practicalities for this webinar. By default, you are all muted. It doesn't mean that we don't want you to interact, of course. You have the ability normally to raise hands on the top ribbon to show that you want to say something. You have always the chat where you can ask questions or comments. When we ask questions, you can also directly, instead of providing a long answer, directly indicate if you agree or disagree with a +1 or -1. Those are simple practices. Of course, if you don't talk, mute yourself. And yeah, happy to start interacting with you today. Last but not least, we propose to record the webinar. If someone disagrees with that, please indicate it in the chat with a -1 right now. The proposition for recording it is simply that not everyone had the opportunity or has the opportunity to join us today. And so it will be simply easier also to share it afterwards. And I see that Pascal has raised a hand. I don't know, Pascal, if it was just a trial or. Okay, no, I continue. Otherwise, feel free to jump in. Okay, so we continue with the recording. Thanks for that. And with that, I propose to directly switch to a small tour de table. Yeah, small. We are already more than 40 people, so it will take a bit. I will put in the chat a link to Mural. Just give me a second. Voilà. With this link, normally you should be able to access Mural, that I will also share on the screen in a second. And you will see in Mural on the top left. So that's the tool we propose to use today for interacting. It's quite intuitive. Here for the first exercise for the tour de table, what we would propose is simply that each and every one of us indicates with a post-it by double clicking. I'll just show it, voila. Indicating who you are and from which organization or department. See already quite some people starting. If you have any issue in connecting, let me know. And sure, we can share the link of the record after the meeting. It might take a couple of days before it's actually available, but yeah, we'll definitely do it. can of course also voilà, increase or reduce the size of the sticker. To the extent possible, try not to put post-its everywhere, right? Yep. And if you move everything, try to undo it. Good. I still see some people typing. Good. So if I quickly go through, I see people from Digital Vlaanderen, Pasja, so Thomas, Laure. I see people from Boza, Fort Boza, Luc. Then people from Fédération Wallonie-Bruxelles. I see, for example, people from, yeah, I don't know by heart the acronym, Svetlana from VMSW. I think what is important with this exercise is simply to see, and that will be a question for you later on, are we missing any important organization within Belgium for the exercise? But let's discuss first the content and see from there, but keep in mind if you have colleagues or other organizations that you know that should participate and be represented in these discussions. That will be also interesting to know. Thanks, Svetlana. So de Vlaamse Maatschappij voor Sociaal Wonen. Very good. Any comments to this or small words that someone would like to raise right now? Otherwise, I propose to switch back to the presentation and give the words also to Marc for a small introduction on ICEG. And I see that Bernard Dubuisson had a raised hand. Bernard.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. Just probably a good time for some kind of clarification. I see quite a lot of several institutions, all profiles, transversal actors, but also business, specific business actors. So could you maybe clarify again who the workshop is intended for in terms of institutions and in terms of profiles of participants? We had, I confess, quite a difficult time defining who would be the best people suited to participate in the workshop, and probably several people participating today don't really know if they are the meeting is for them. So maybe it's an interesting question to address.
Yeah, thanks, Bernard, for this. I think that's definitely something that we should clarify in the coming slides. That was also the intent to give a bit more explanations about the context of this work, the objectives that we pursue, and who we are, who we would like to gather in terms of profiles for this exercise. And I think in general, for this kind of exercises, it's important to have a mix between people who have background in semantics, so in modeling activities, but also, and it's quite important to have people from the business who can actually talk about what are their needs, because this is what really will make the outcome of this exercise, the model and the specifications, useful. And I think that's where maybe it's unclear today for some people what is modeling, what is semantic interoperability, but that's not the issue. I think it's important to have also indeed the people from the business. But to what extent do we need all organizations represented? That's a valid question. And I don't know, Marc, if you have a strong opinion on this or the other members of the ICEG, but in general, I think it would be good to have at least a good representation from the different regions, touching different domains, areas, dealing with public services and public organizations. But maybe it's not yet clear, but we will continue dive into that. And if at the end of the workshop it's still not clarified, please come back and we will also clarify it. Okay. Marc, yeah, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Welcome from my side as well. Good morning to all of you. We are living a special moment together here because it is the first time that we will be doing a full-blown interfederal data standardization exercise. As you perhaps know, ICEG is a collaboration agreement that already dates from 2013 on e-government. And in ICEG, the different levels of the government in Belgium are represented. We have the federal, regional, and communities that are represented there. And in 2019, under the ICEG umbrella, it was decided to create a data standardization workgroup. And so this is the first time that we will do a big exercise in that context. This is for me an occasion to thank you in the first place for attending this workshop, for spending your time and your expertise for developing a standard around public organizations and public services. In the second place, I would also like to thank the members of the core ICEG team for the preparation of this exercise, and also for making it possible to reach out to a network that covers the entire public sector in Belgium. And the proof of that is the good mix that we have in this session, where the different levels of that public sector are represented. So I leave it to this, and I hand you over back to the project team. I hope that you will all have a very fruitful and an interesting session today. Back to you, Florian.
Yep, thanks, Mark. And with let's continue. And the next discussion then, or talk, is about the importance of harmonization, and with a broader context of, okay, what's happening at European level, and why is it important also to discuss today harmonization at Belgian level. And for that, I give the floor to Seth van Holland, who is the program manager of SEMIC. It's within the semantic area. It's a well-known action of the European Commission promoting interoperability amongst the different member states. Seth, first yours.
Merci Florian. Donc je suis vraiment sincèrement très content d'être avec vous, beste collega's. I think I'll make it brief because at 10:15 I'm getting my second vaccination shot 5 kilometers from here, and I still need to print out my form. Whatever. Apologies for that. But I think there are two key aspects I wanted to highlight. First of all, we really have a historical momentum budget-wise. So I suppose that many of you are aware that Belgium will receive 9.6 billion from the Recovery Fund, out of which 24% has been earmarked for the digital transformation. So for all of the work that we're doing on making data flow more easily between, I would say, the local, regional, national level within a complex country as Belgium, which we all love, that provides a tremendous opportunity. However, I would say, so here I'm based in my home office in Saint-Jos. I'm Dutch speaking, I have lots of family in Flanders. In the weekends, I spend them in Belleuil, in lovely NO, with my French speaking partner. So I think I'm the first who insists on the importance of making the data flow easy between all of the different local, regional, and national levels. And I think that's the main reason why I'm very happy that we have this moment together. Working on semantic interoperability is fundamental, but it's a complex process, which often takes a lot of time. So I think I also understand very much the question which Bernard raised 10 minutes ago, who should be here on this call? Well, it's a difficult answer because we actually need to bring together both the data modeling and the IT experts who understand how all of the administrative backends of sometimes very complex line of business applications work. But we also need actually the business experts. We need people who understand social security, how to introduce a environmental permit, or if I want to create a veranda on the other side of my house. So we need actually a combination of different profiles. And this is also one of the reasons why, voilà, we need kind of a big tent approach. We need to invest a lot of energy and time into community building. So I would say so for anyone who has participated in the Single Digital Gateway effort, perhaps for those who have not followed up on the SDG regulation. So I would say to cut things short, the SDGR promotes or catalyzes the automated exchange of administrative evidences between member states. It's a very important process, and the Commission has as its role to provide a common language and to standardize the connectors. But of course, the subsidiarity principle is terribly important, meaning that the European Union only tackles what cannot be done on a national level. However, we want to promote a single market, facilitate or harmonize, for example, the data which will be fed into our COVID passport, so that as European citizens, as Belgians, that we can go to France, to Spain, wherever we want within Europe. So there is an inherent tension between having the communes, the provinces, the national levels to not impose any stringent measures to turn over their backends. But there is also a need for harmonization. I think here semantic interoperability sits at the very heart. And so this is very much, I would say, the global EU level perspective. But I think to seize, I would say, the budgetary momentum that we have now, and which we need to roll out over the next 2 or 3 years as public administrators, I think at the end, any citizen in Flanders, Brussels, Wallonia, voilà, they just want a good service. And for the data to flow correctly across all of these regions, I'm very happy that all of you have made time available to discuss together with Florian and the whole team. I think, as Florian mentioned, you won't be starting from scratch. A lot of good work can be reused. Voilà, and I would say this was a quick word from me. And again, semantic interoperability, it's a long road. It's sometimes frustrating, but do know that it's the only way to make progress. And at the end of the day, to provide a better service for the citizen. And I think across regions, at the end of the day, again, as administrators, that is our responsibility for which we strive for. Un grand merci. Kijk er naar uit om ook met veel van jullie samen te werken. If anyone wants to have, I don't have the time to go into the details of the DEP funding program, which will also provide for cities, for different regions, all sorts of exciting possibilities to fund projects on digital transformation. If you want to get more information, I put my email address on top of the comment section. I do tremendously apologize that I have to run off, but anyway, I don't want to miss my vaccination. I hope you understand that. Thanks a lot for attending this session, and I hope to follow up more closely in the weeks and the months to come. Bye.
Thank you, Seth, and good vaccination. Good, and I see, Veronique, you are quite active in the chat. That's good. And I fully agree with the motto. That's, I think, the core idea of interoperability. It takes time because basically it's based on consensus. It's consensus driven. And so if you leave people on the way, then it's not interoperability anymore. Then you go alone. And with no further ado, let's move forward with more specific context about this exercise. So what are we trying to achieve? Is really to define together what are the key information that will help us to describe public organizations and public services. Why both? Because both are related to each other, and when you try to describe public services, usually you end up in describing also public organizations and the other way around. And normally, most of you have already some ideas or practice in terms of data modeling, or simply on a day-to-day basis experience with those concepts. And so we will start from there. Who is participating today? We have seen in the who is who a lot of different organizations. The key drivers of ICEG itself are FODBOSA, Digitaal Vlaanderen, and Fédération Wallonie-Bruxelles. But of course, as mentioned earlier, this is an exercise that is open to all public organizations, all public administrations in Belgium that are interested in participating. And then why are we doing this? In general, interoperability has semantic interoperability has different benefits. It helps to define and to structure information data better, which also in the flow of the linked open data is quite interesting. If you know a bit about open data, you have the 5 stars of Tim Berners-Lee, and basically we are aiming at the 5 stars, but starting with the first 2 and third stars. And a second objective is, or benefit is really based on once you have agreement and data that is machine readable, so that a machine can process. Basically, you can start also defining protocols to exchange information between systems, and that's quite interesting for different applications at Belgian level, at interfederal, intergovernmental level, or basically to make your information collectible, harvestable by any machine that's by Europe, or for example, as part of the single digital gateway, or by any citizen. If you look more at, okay, I want to find information about a public organization, can I do that automatically instead of every time searching for it myself? Those are specific examples. And yeah, I will not dive into all benefits, but this is the main idea. How are we going to achieve this? As mentioned earlier, we will really start from use cases that you experience or that you would like to experience as related to information about public organization, public services. So that's part of today's agenda. And from those use cases, we will look at it together and try to assess what are the key information in those use cases that would be needed actually to structure my information, structure data in a way that captures everything I need to achieve this use case. And then, and that's part of where the facilitators, the editing team will participate and try to combine those information into something that makes sense, a model, and where we will all together review this model progressively and assess whether it fits really the use cases, whether we agree on the definitions, on the type of data to be used, and together reach normally a consensus towards a common data model. Again, how are we going to do that? Through workshops like today, where we organize the content, we propose, we come with propositions, and you as domain experts participate and share your feedback, or beforehand give your input through, for example, collaborative platforms such as GitHub. And from there, you also have time to review the different information, the different propositions beforehand or at specific moment in times. And that's usually how we proceed with those two elements, the workshops, the reviews. And from there, the idea is that we develop the models in terms of deliverable, and we share them with you in different formats: human readable, machine readable. Are there any questions so far? If not, I continue, but feel free to jump.
Yeah. I have a question. You are talking now about cross-domain working, new APIs development, and standards development, and then immediately my first reflex is, what about the standards or standard working groups like the Open Geospatial Consortium? What is the relation of your work with those initiatives? Because they're working on the same issues.
Yeah, and I think it's important indeed to dive into that. First, I think to answer your question, we need to refine a bit what is semantic interoperability compared to other layers. For example, we are not going as part of this exercise to define new APIs. It's not the objective. The objective is really to agree on common definitions, common data formats and data structures of information that you have normally already today. That's one. And the second is there are many existing standards, initiatives at different levels, global, European, by groups such as W3C, Dublin Core, that are represented by different public administrations, companies, NGOs, etc. The idea is to start from what exists to the maximal extent, but of course to make it fit with your needs, and that's where the use cases are needed. And so to see from the use cases and information identified, where can we to the maximal extent reuse what exists in existing models? When it comes to OGC or the Open Geospatial Consortium, I don't think we will directly reuse it because it's not directly focusing on really defining context neutral public organizations and public services, but it doesn't mean that it cannot be linked to it. I don't know, Rinke, if it answers your question.
I just had to unmute myself. You answered my question in the way that you would like to have a framework for interoperability, and that you want to reuse standards that are already existing, like the W3C API standards and so on. And I believe that OGC, I'm not an advocate of OGC, but I know that also the OGC works with W3C to make their APIs generally reusable and not very context specific anymore. So so thank you for that answer.
Okay, good. And from that aspect, I fully agree with what Thomas just mentioned in the chat. We will come to existing sources that we should look at. We know quite some already, but if you think that we should look at OGC, it's fine for us to also look at it and of course consider, okay, are there elements that are useful? And that's where I think your inputs from the different participants will be really valuable. And yeah, I see Anne indicated the EIF, and that's exactly the link that is also on the slide. Thanks for that. So what I wanted to show with this slide is simply, you have different levels of interoperability. You can start from legal interoperability, moving to the organizational interoperability, and then you have what we describe as the semantic interoperability, where, as mentioned earlier, it's really about developing together common vocabularies, common understanding definitions of data, information, and making sure that the grammar used, the format of the data is agreed or made in such a way that it can be exchanged between systems and understood in the same way. It has to be differentiated from the technical interoperability, where you really put that in practice and using the models defined as part of the semantic layer in the system. So really implementing the different data agreed into something that actually works in practice. For the EIF, I think if you have never heard of it, it's a good document, I think, to touch upon what is interoperability about and really dive into the different layers. I'm not working for Eli, so I can make some promotion about it. We mentioned some existing standards or models that exist, and here I can also advocate some. Here I'm directly working also on this one. It's not because I'm working on it that I'm advocating it. It's simply it's a European standard that that is also extensively used for example at Flemish level with the Oslo standards, where they really start from there and say what is relevant for us, how to make it useful for our communities, and that's exactly why we are proposing also to describe it quickly, to give you an idea of, okay, what are we talking about? And can you read? Normally, yes, it's big enough. Otherwise, I can switch to another screen, but yeah. So you see in the middle, the public service class, and here the CPSVAP, the Core Public Service Vocabulary Application Profile, is really a model made at European level for defining the core elements around the public service, meaning that the public service is really at the core, at the heart of this model. And that's where you see how public services can be grouped by different types of events. For example, life events or business events. Business events could be starting a company, closing the company. Life events could be having a child, getting married, etc. Yeah, I can zoom in. Just give me a second. Is this better? Yeah, okay. So you see public service here in the middle, event here, and you see how from event side you can group public services by different types of events, because you can have in certain organizations different public services related to the same event. And from an end user perspective, for the citizen, for the businesses, it's very important to be able at a certain point on the website to say, instead of looking for the exact name of your public service, that is sometimes quite specific, to also look at specific events that are actually closer to them and to what they live on a day-to-day basis. So if I'm a citizen and I want to get married, I search for life events and getting married, and automatically I would find, it's kind of a categorization, I would find automatically all the public services related. That's, for example, one example of use case that you could have, making your information user-centric for around public service. You have different information. For example, public service is usually coming from a legal document and follows different rules that actually implements this legal document, this legal resource. A public service may have one or several contact points. A public service follows or requires different requirements, criterion requirements, such as you must be an adult in order to get married, and delivers usually produces different outputs if the right evidences are provided. And then maybe a last one is a public service at European level, how we define it is really, it has always a competent authority. You see here the relation with public organization. We say that each public service should have at least, or should have one public organization defined as the competent authority for this public service. And that's where it's also interesting to have several organizations involved in this exercise, because it helps to look at different domains and areas to make sure that what we are going to develop together is context neutral and can be applied in any domain in Belgium. That's for public service, and quickly showing you the same for public organization. Normally it's big enough. So this model is under revision, but by September we should have a new version at European level. But still, most of it will remain. What is important is really to see that a public organization can also have contact points, is a subset, a subclass of organization itself, meaning that a public organization is a specific type of organization. A public organization is usually relevant within a specific administrative territorial units. Some of you may know NUTS. It's a code list maintained by Eurostat, which defines in Europe at different levels of granularity the territories where you can find for statistic purpose. In this case, we use it also to define the jurisdictions. Sorry. A public organization may also occur different change events in its life, because a government changes and you decide to restructure certain things, and then public organization change names or structures and you reorganize things. And this is just also to keep track of how it evolves. And a public organization has one or several specific addresses. So those are, thanks Benoit, nomenclature des unités territoriales in French, yeah. Those are examples of information that is structured today at European level. No. I will, of course, we will share the slides after the call. So all the links and information that is indicated, you will also get it. But I see that some participants are quite active in sharing the links, so that's very good. That we have just discussed. Anything unclear about those? It's not that we need to really dive into those two models right now, but just to say that those are kind of our starting point for our journey when it comes to how we are going to model. And depending on the information we want to include in the model, we will agree at Belgian level. Depending on those information, we will look first into those models to see, okay, is there information that is already defined over there? And why is it interesting or important? Just to ensure that what we define at Belgian level can also be used by other countries or in exchange of information. And I think that's very important, that we don't make this exercise useful at Belgian level, and then we need to make the exact same exercise in 1 year time for the other countries of Europe or any other country in the world. So voilà, that's the idea of starting from something that is already developed and already pushed towards different member states and applied today in different member states. With that, I propose to go back to Mural. The link is still in the chat. Normally, I can put it back. And the idea here now is really to dive together. If you go to the bottom, to the second exercise, with key definitions, so the bottom left, the key definitions that are proposed today at European level. What I propose is that we go through it together, and when reading it, please consider, does this make sense for me? Or are we missing something? Do I have a different definition? It's totally fine to have several definitions today. The idea is really to look at them a bit together right now, but if there are too many definitions, we will also analyze it afterwards and come back with a proposition that works for us. Of course, if the European definition works, let's reuse it as well. So on the left side, we have public organization, defined as any organization that is defined as being part of the public sector by a legal framework at any level. And then you have more explanations. The fact that the public sector body definition given in the Public Sector Information Directive is also compliant with the definition above, where there is an idea of defining a specific purpose that is for the general interest, that it must have a legal personality, and maybe we'll need to come back on that, we'll see. And finally, it is ideally financed or governed by public law or financed by state and regional local authorities. Yeah. And do I need to reshare the link again? Or it was the one above? Any comments on this definition? Yeah, Bernard.
When it comes to the purpose of the use of the definition, we need to consider maybe a broader range. Let me give an example. If we need the concept of public organization to link or to use it in the global schema that you used earlier about public service, you may have some public services that are offered by non-public actors, which are not maybe authorities, because those services have been outsourced to the private sector, for example. You may also have hybrid organizations that render a public service, but don't really have the organic status of a public service. So how do these categories fit in your model? I can give a few examples. It may be, for example, bus companies which are privately owned but have follow a public service purpose. But we could also talk about, for example, local media, which are like local televisions, which are defined as public service by law, but not operated as public service, for example. Just to give a few thoughts for the road.
Yeah, I think it's thanks for starting the round. I think first we need to differentiate for now public organization and public service, right? But I see also that Veronique and Thomas raised hands, so I don't know if you want to directly answer or add to what Bernard said.
Yes.
You go first, Veronique.
Yeah, go ahead, Veronique. She raised hands.
It's just like I was thinking that you could have also non-public organizations that render public services. I think that's a different thing. I don't think you can a private organization is a private organization. I think we do have the same problem sometimes. For example, in something erediensten, how is worship services, something in English. There are also some private organizations that represent the worship, the specific religion, for example, but they're not a public organization, but they do operate within the services that are orchestrated by offered by worship services. It's a really difficult word in English. So I'm not sure whether or not I don't think the public organization definitions should be altered, but rather thinking about how you can involve private organizations in public services, something like that.
Yes. In addition to that, I was involved in the creation of those definitions, so I have some background in these matters. What's crucial in this discussion is that it has to be a competent authority. There has to be a public organization that is competent to fulfill some kind of control or decision making involved in creating public services. It doesn't mean that it has to be done by a public organization. The public service has to be created by law, by a public organization that can be outsourced to any private organization in the community. So that's crucial, the aspect of competent authority that has to be a public organization. There's a difference between a telecom provider that gives us access to internet or worship services that we can go to church every Sunday and pray to God or other institutes. That's the difference between those two. It has to be clear, it has to be involved in our way of thinking in these matters.
Thanks. And I think that's exactly where distinguishing the two, public service and public organization, is important at this stage. So we are not trying right now to make the link yet, even though that's a bit what Veronique and Thomas described. But I have a question to the rest of the group and also to you, Bernard. Would that fit what you have today as a definition, or what you practice on a day-to-day basis?
Well, in our business cases, which are information about public services, it's not abstract. It's very purpose-oriented, and we need to provide the most relevant information to the public or to the user in order to fulfill the service. I understand that we might need some extra from the model that has been discussed and that which we are familiar with. So I have no problem with that, but that would be more what you described about the competent authority is something that is really important for us, but not necessary for the user. The user more importantly needs the contact point or to whom they need to go to have the right or obligation fulfilled. You have the same problem with notarism, for example, which you cannot define as a specific entity, because you can go to any notaris and have your service for certain public service obligations. But we've been managing with that for a while, but not very cleanly, I would say. So we are very much in eager to discuss how to address those cases in a working group, so we can harmonize the way we model those cases across entities in Belgian level, at least.
Good. Yeah, and I think we'll need to dive into those use cases maybe not today, let's see, but probably in the upcoming discussions. Anne, yeah.
Since we are talking about organizations, I wondered if we couldn't use the Kruispuntbank voor ondernemingen, Bancaire voor des entreprises, and simply have a look at the legal forms which would be included or considered as public organization. For instance, I've just looked up KBR. We are defined as other federal service. I've looked up Literatuur Vlaanderen. They are qualified as a public institution. So if we would have a look at the legal forms and decide, okay, this effectively are organizations that are considered as public organizations, then it's a really pragmatic way of working. It's not a conceptual definition, but it could be handy for further trajectory. Perhaps.
Yeah. Thomas, you want to add something?
Yes, indeed. It has to be a starting point. You won't get every public organization within the KBO, but a grand mass of it will be defined there. I can give you lots of examples that aren't registered within the KBO, but it has to be a starting point to move to define those types, to define code lists and so on, and then go on from there.
Mm-hmm.
Bernard?
Yes, I would add another dimension, which is the granularity of the definition. We have many public services who are gathered behind one VAT number, and you may have several hundreds of services which are defined within an organigram, an internal organigram, like le Service Public de Wallonie, for example, or Ministère de la Fédération Wallonie-Bruxelles. We have been struggling also with that. So what is the best granularity, and does it fit the internal definitions, or do we need other things? Maybe sometimes we have like very defined structures by law, like directions, departments. Sometimes you have a cell that has been created out of kind of nowhere. So, well, that's a question that we address also, but it's more like I think it can be dealt with through each organization on where they need to, which granularity they need to provide in order to give the best information. But when I say that, I stress that information is never abstract. It's always purpose related. And we need to define our use cases in order to best define or clarify our concepts, because to my experience, it's impossible to do it in abstract. I know it's tempting to do it from a semantic interoperability point of view, but I think we really need those use cases in order to exchange together and toward a common goal.
Yep. And I think we will need to dive into that in a second. I saw Veronique, yeah, you had your hand raised. And after that, I propose to switch to public service, and then we'll dive into the use cases a bit later. Go ahead, Veronique.
Okay, but maybe I was, I thought that Bernard was talking about public services already, because he was mentioning, but maybe I misunderstood. So,
if I understood correctly, sorry. He discussed a lot about Bernard. You feel free to contradict. He discussed about how to structure organizations and organizational units, kind of within this organization. At what level of granularity should we go? And then I think you made a point about, okay, and then how is this related to the services that are provided?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, so I agree with you. There is a link, but yeah, let's start first thing first.
Yes.
And with that, I see the post-it disappeared. There was a post-it, but okay. About public services, I don't know if everyone had the time to go through the definition during the discussion. So it's a mandatory or discretionary set of activities performed or able to be performed by or on behalf, and I think this is important, of a public organization, publicly funded and arise from public policy. And then it may be of the benefit of an individual, a business, or other public authority, or groups of any of these. And a service exists whether it is used or not. There are services that kind of could be deprecated. And yeah, the term of benefit is kind of abstract in this case, because it can in certain cases be just fulfilling an obligation that by law you have to do as a citizen or as a business. Yeah, I see a comment. I propose to add public officer to on behalf of. I don't know who wrote this one. Can the person explain a bit? Or otherwise, are there any other comments regarding the definition? Bernard, yeah?
I don't want to mobilize the floor, but in the French-speaking area, I would say, we've been dealing with the question of that definition for quite a while. I would say 10 years, and I give a little bit of background because those questions have been addressed at the level of the Office for Simplification, and we had a strong tendency to promote user orientation of public services, and that reflects a lot on our concept of public service, which is differs from this definition in the sense that we tend to define it in our databases, in our data models, as something from the user's point of view and from the citizen's point of view, or for the beneficiary from point of view, and not from the public organization's point of view, which makes sense when you deal with providing information to the users, of course. So I don't see really that in the definition, and I would say that we have been really clinging to this definition because it has helped us really push for more user orientation within the public services organizations, which now define themselves regarding the service they offer to the public, rather than the place in their organization or the missions, which is a very important point to us.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's really relevant to the definition, because the definition, the difference, I believe, is very narrow, and it hasn't really posed a big problem so far when we've been dealing with interoperability, for example, with BOSA for professional qualifications and so on. But in the long run, if we want to exchange more or information and provide a common framework to provide the same, for example, information about the same life event, which is dealt by regions on Belgian level, but we need to harmonize how we provide information for how to do it in Flanders, in Brussels, or in Wallonia. But we might have a problem with that point of view of how the public service is viewed, I would say. And for example, to give a clear example, we define public services as their title is the verb, contains the verb of the action that the user should do to have the service provided, which is quite different from, for example, the acronym of the structure of the process that has been defined by law, for example.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if I make it clear, but feel free.
I think so. The fact that you are taking a different perspective, or a perspective that is more user-centered rather than administrative-centered. So you say, the objective is not to look at the procedure behind the public service, what's the process, the different steps, etc., but more define it in a way that is useful for the end user, the citizens, the businesses, other public organizations. What I would ask is, if you have a specific definition already, it would be useful to have it directly, and this is the same for anyone. Yeah, great.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
To what Bernard is saying, because we had the discussion also within our department and with the Department of the Environment and Spatial Planning of the Flemish government. And we have a couple of public services to the public, which nobody is waiting for to consume. It's issuing permits, which is of course something we have to do. And another public service, to give an example, is to go on site and do inspections. Nobody is waiting for that, especially some companies that are now in the news, but it's a service to the public. So we've also been struggling in defining, should we put a verb in there? Should we describe the service name in terms of who is consuming the service? But it's very difficult. Sometimes it's a citizen, sometimes it's a company. And sometimes, like the examples that I gave, it's the society as a whole, the public, let's say. So we've tried to come up with something that worked for every kind of consumer, public, citizen, and company. But I think it's a waste of energy. So you can always decompose or have sub terminology that you use in your specific environment. But I think at a higher level, you don't have to make it, you have to keep it generic enough to be able to work with that and not try to fix it for every consumer possible.
I think a very valid point you say there, Pascal, is that there are different types of services, and we don't have to harmonize the name to agree on the definition itself. The way of we don't need a naming convention yet, or that's not the primary objective. But to that, I see also that Geert, you wanted also to say something.
I want to comment a little bit on the way the definitions are written here. First, I think defining things is an art. It's quite difficult. You can't define public service if you don't have a definition of a service. If you make the definition of a service clear, in a sense that a service is essentially a transaction of non-tangible goods, then this helps you to define the public service. The public service is a service defined in the level above that is being executed by or under the control of a public authority, which means you have to define public authority. So if you start building your definitions in a way that you also take care of defining the concepts that you use in your definitions, which are important because your service, your public service, is actually one of the many possible subcategories with different classifications of services. If you don't define service, you get a discussion as the example of inspection is a service. In this sense, an inspection is not a service. An inspection is an activity. So you have to be incredibly clear at that level. So what I would suggest is that around this table, you really have to take linguists, people with linguistic knowledge, and who are very well trained in taxonomies and that kind of stuff. And then you can go through your you can make your definitions much more clear. For instance, something that you have to avoid at all time in a definition is like services may be for the benefit of maybe. So what is then the rest? If you say maybe, then you have to define maybe not, because otherwise your definition is incomplete. So this will be much clearer if you state here that beneficiaries of public services are individuals and organizations, because the list you give here are an individual, a business, or a public authority, or a group of these. You're actually already defining subcategories which have no meaning in the definition of a public service. So you have to really go to your definitions like that. And by defining one definition, you'll end up with a list of other things that you have to define. Don't try to put them into the definition. So that's my comment on the way this works. The term may in a definition should never appear. You can put that in the comments, or you could put that in the documentation around it, but never ever into the definition, because it means that you create some kind of a semantic swamp by doing this. Mm-hmm. And the idea is just to avoid that. And another advice is try to stay away as much as possible of the IT level and the implementations when you define at this level. You essentially need only a few things to define. What are the things that you are defining, the tangibles and the non-tangibles? What are the relationships between them? And what are the possible classifications of your relationships, classifications of your classifications, and classifications of your things? That is what you need at the semantic level. So if you start building your definitions from that viewpoint, they will be much more clear. But you need to build the classification vocabularies and all the stuff on the sideline to make it work. Don't try to put everything in the classification, it won't work.
Good. Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's largely my comment on or just what I'm trying to do is to make this a straightforward procedure and cut it in parts that have meaning. Don't do something like a definition. It's in a FOF, a friend of a friend, where the definition of a person is a person is a person because it is a person. That's
I know FOF very well.
At that level. So there you see how important it is to be semantically clear at this level.
Yeah, and I think it's a very valid point, and that should also be raised, and meaning that here we have an opportunity also to look at whether those definitions make sense for us, and from there raise change requests at European level to tell them. Sometimes it's also telling me, because I'm sometimes also participating in some of those exercises, but saying, okay, I would like to change this for those reasons. So let's also use this.
Someone said in the that the comment on semantic clarity. That's what I really am advocating. Semantic clarity, some kind of a pure methodology or a very purified methodology. If you use a term and you don't have a definition of it, and the fact that you don't have a definition within a definition of that, that will introduce the possibility of different interpretations of it. And that's what you want to avoid.
And to that extent, Geert, I don't know if you have already a definition for each, or if you could review those definitions and give also your input. You mentioned some, but if you have others, it would be great to have it also written.
Yeah, well, I'll do that. The ones I gave was just on the fly. It's not something that I have somewhere in a drawer to pull out, but this is really a core issue. The better you do this, the better that will increase dramatically the quality of all the work below.
Yeah. And then I see the point of Veronique, that then in the notes you need to specify further what you really understand, so that you make the link with the implementation level, the operational level, so that you don't end up with a definition that can be implemented in too many different ways. Yeah. Or I don't know, Veronique, if you want to
add one comment to it. My real, let us say, dream of this is that you can create a direct lineage, a modeled lineage between the definitions and the implementation levels. So it means that you have to start to think of a modeling stack that allows you to do so. And it works in the other way around also. If someone changes something at a technical level, you can see how that impacts the definition and vice versa. If you change the definition, you can see all the IT objects at whatever level that are impacted by it. It's only by building modeling stacks of that quality that you'll solve, let us say that you'll make a major step into a maintainable interoperability. But that's a horrible, difficult job. It's easier to say that it's something to try to achieve, but it's horribly difficult, I think.
I think we can aim at challenging objectives, but I think we need also to start small and agree on the core terms, and then bit by bit see if we can dive into classifications, etc. together.
Yep, good, okay.
Any further points? Otherwise, I propose to move forward. Good. And I see also the comment from Pascal. I think it's a valid point that in general we should avoid ending in too much linguistic that do not make sense anymore for the business people. That on a day-to-day basis should be using or applying such definitions. Exactly. So it shouldn't be a theoretical exercise. But yeah, we can spend a bit of time on theories and making sure that from a semantic point of view it makes sense and the definitions are well made. Even more for the public organization and public service terms, which represent the core of what we want to define. But let's not only look at that. Yeah, and indeed, that's something that you can spend quickly half your time on it instead of actually producing something on which everyone more or less agrees. Good. Okay. Now let's dive into some of the use cases. Here, the ones that are displayed will sometimes be you will feel a bit abstract, and that's exactly why we need to discuss together to make them more concrete to your business cases. And those are because simply those are coming also from a European perspective of use case we found that could apply to across any public organization or any organization delivering public services. And so, of course, you end up in certain abstraction, but let's try to make it more concrete for us. So the first one is about how to facilitate the exchange of basic information between or about public organizations. Earlier, when I presented briefly the core public organization vocabulary at European level, we discussed about contact point, about the legal framework, about the address, the admin territorial units. So those are basic information that usually you want to agree upon and you want to be able to exchange and understand in a common way across organizations, across public organizations. And this can help for many different things. It can go from improving the searchability of your organization by a citizen. If you type, for example, on well-known search engines certain keywords, you will automatically find the contact point or the opening hours of this organization. That's just an example. And you don't want to, that based on the keywords you type, you get completely different information for each public organization. So there is a matter of also of continuity to make it user-friendly. And this can help also to see how organizations interrelate or how they are interconnected with each other, and ease the comparison between sectors, or simply improve the understanding that people will have from these organizations, and thanks to those common definitions. That's for the first one. I will quickly go through a couple of use cases that we thought about, and then let's dive together. So think about the use cases that you have or ideas you have, and then we'll go to Mural back and start filling in. I can show you already so that if you have ideas, you can already put it over there. So on the top right, if you think about some use cases that are either for public organization or public services, or both, feel free to start. You can copy paste. I will unlock it. Or you can double click and make a new post-it. And you can start writing some while I'm describing also the use cases we thought about here. The second one is a bit related to what Bernard described earlier. How to structure and represent those structures of organizations, of public organizations and units within those public organizations. And concrete cases behind this representation is, of course, trying to be consistent in the way we do it, but also being able simply for people to access information about those structures easily and ideally in an editable format. While usually what we have today is, in kind of best case, a PDF or an image of the structure of the organization, and it gets kind of difficult to know, okay, then you apply in the image, you copy, for example, the contact point for each department, or and you need to write it down yourself, or if you want to know a bit more about this specific sub-organization, you can, because simply it's an image. While as soon as you talk about linked open data, you can, for example, click on your HTML page on a specific department where you would like to know more, and you could see further information that you have about the contact points, opening hours, and everything we discussed before about this specific subpart. So that's what this subcase is about, and also related to the first one, where as from the moment you dive into that, you can also keep track of how your public organization evolved throughout time, and see how it was structured in the past and how it changed. That's for this second use case. If there's something really unclear about a use case, please raise your hand or ask in the chat, or simply interrupt. The third one is really about, as from the moment you have data structured, you can work on the quality of your data, but you can also work on common systems between organizations. We talk about, for example, HR systems, facilities management systems, E-invoicing systems, those are 3 examples. You can think about others, but the idea is instead of creating in silos your own systems and having some everyone your maintenance, your development cost, etc., but to combine those into to get some synergies between organizations. So that's the main idea behind this one. And that's a common use case between public organization and public services, is the fact that as from the moment you have also common definitions, etc., you can start harvesting, collecting information, metadata, or information about those public organization, public services, and combine them at a higher level, higher in terms of geography, area, in order to simply offer these catalogs, these portfolios to specific users, either citizens, businesses, or for internal uses as well. And we referred at the beginning of this webinar about the single digital gateway. What they are trying to achieve as part of this European regulation is to define one unique catalog of services for the entire Europe. Catalog of services, they call it procedures. Yeah, in the end, let's not talk about that right now. But it's really, they try to harvest information about all those procedures, all those services amongst the different organizations within the entire Europe. So you can imagine if you don't have a common understanding how difficult this can be. So this use case is about, as from the moment you have common definitions, it's way easier first to create such a portfolio, such a catalog, but also way easier to manage and maintain it. When it comes to public services, as from the moment you start describing, it's very similar to the first use case. As from the moment you describe public services, you in a common way, it's easier to find information about those public services. You can improve searchability, for example, by annotating your HTML pages so that search engines can find those tags on your web pages and use it to retrieve best results when people are searching through the engine. This is just one example, but it can be also simply about how to combine information between administrations. It's also easier to, as from the moment you have common definitions, common information to manage how you manage your services, detect duplicates, detect services that are kind of outdated or completely not used anymore. And from there, simply it's easier to detect those and take actions. So you can start having some business logic to have triggers that either triggers human actions or directly updates of your databases. So those are also examples. It's a lot of text, so I'm just giving a sketch of it. I'm trying to summarize it because, I don't think you need to completely read it through. But again, if it's not clear, please shout. And otherwise, I propose also to move towards the mural again, where you see already the use cases I've just mentioned above. I see also new ones. What I propose, so it's a two-phase exercise. I see some thumbs up on certain use cases. That's great. That will be the second phase, where on the right side we will have some hard dots to prioritize and say, okay, what are the use cases where you feel the most interested in, or where you see the most value out of it. So first phase is really, do you have other use cases that you may think about? And for those, please simply describe them in a few words, and then we'll go through it. So I propose for that to take 5 minutes. So if you want also, if you don't have ideas or if you need a coffee right now, this is the moment. I will start the timer. I will put 6 minutes. And at the end of the timer, I propose to go through it. And to create new ones, the easier is to double click and then to enlarge the sticker nodes created.
Ja. Wacht.
Good. Do I still need? I see Mark, you are still writing. Still give 30 seconds. And then I propose to go through it and that each person that wrote one quickly explains it. So that we can also start categorizing the different use cases, because I think there are some that are overlapping or connected. Good. So let's start with the one I'm zooming on. So harvest information on public organizations from the source. Yeah. Does someone want to quickly describe it, or? In general, my understanding of this one is being able to collect information about public organizations from different sources, but in terms of decisions, does someone understand this part specifically?
It's from me.
Ah, okay, go ahead, Honey.
Well, that's something we can already do with linked data. If for example, a local government publishes a decision where they decide upon to oprichten. That's the word I can't find in English. A new public organization at the local level, that we could harvest it. Yeah.
That you could harvest
the fact that there's a new public organization that was decided upon at a local level, so that nobody ever again has to input it in 1,000 databases. Yeah. We should harvest it from the source. So that's kind of I changed it. It's not only decisions, but that's like the main source for everything that the government does, I think. Yep. So that's the starting point. But for some information, you probably would also want to harvest the websites, for example, of the local governments, because that will probably be correct. Else the mayor would complain to the the administration, probably.
So harvesting information on decisions taken as from the moment they are entered into something that can be harvested, a database, the website, any other source that it can be considered as authentic.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And it's interesting because I thought about also another one where you could use, as from the moment you start describing and structuring your descriptions of public organizations, but also public services, it's actually more on the middle side. You can also start improving the way law is defined, because sometimes you see a gap between legal interoperability and semantic interoperability or technical interoperability, simply because people don't think in the same exact way. And as from the moment you see the law, you're like, I need to implement that. How am I going to do that in practice? Mm-hmm. And you see different interpretations.
Yeah, it works two ways. It works like a circle. Yeah. Yeah.
Good. I see sharing data for control. It's rather straightforward, but I don't know if the person that wrote it wants to describe it further. Because what kind of control? Is it about the quality controls, or is it about checking that the services proposed are actually enabled by law or within a formal
Is it legal?
Yeah,
is it
exactly.
legal?
So we can think of different types of controls. if you want to describe it, feel free. Otherwise, I propose to move forward. Organize a portal where to find grants, subventions in Belgium. Yeah, something every one of us would love at certain point in life, I imagine. And that would require different kinds of information from the different public organizations or providers of public services. Oh, yeah, thanks, Brenda. So a portal is about harvesting and managing a portfolio. The management of portfolio is here. We'll group there. Over here. Where would you group yours, Veronique, with one of the existing, or not really? It's also about harvesting and grouping information, but yeah, it covers different aspects. We can keep it also that way. Going on the right side, describe the steps of a public service. So I understand from there the steps from a user perspective, or the steps from the administration perspective, or both?
Yeah, I would, in the first place, from a user perspective, but you could also extend it to an organizational context. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say user service provider. Yeah, because I think that both are important, and it's not something that is defined to an implementation level within at European level within CPSVAP. I use the acronym. If you are lost with that, feel free to let me know. It's the Core Public Service Vocabulary Application Profile. Yeah, it's a bit long. And so I think if we need that, that's something we will need also to define ourselves. I think in Oslo there are already some propositions. I don't know in Nostra, Bernard, if there are also clearly definitions of how to describe or classes and properties for how to describe steps of a public service. In any case, we don't need to dive into that right now, but that's something interesting in terms of information behind needed that we will discuss right after. So you may also think about that. Yeah, so describing information. Then describe what a public organization is doing. Yeah, I don't know. I think someone made all those use cases at once. So yes, maybe it's, yeah.
That'll be me.
Go ahead. I think it's easier if you describe it yourself directly rather than I asking you to describe it one by one.
Sure. Well, the ones on top, and I put some on the bottom as well that are simply building on what others wrote, describing the service and the steps. And I had a post-it saying it could be used in chatbots, but that's already a further step. But then the other ones with the arrows, the two on the bottom, are a bit an internal perspective from service definitions. I'm sure I'm not the only organization that is struggling with describing what we're doing and agreeing on that. From our experience, describing what an organization is doing based on the processes, on the business processes, is not enough. It's a process list is unstable. It changes via automation or because a public organization is split into two, or there are mergers, etc., etc. So we need something that is more stable, and we believe that a public service catalog could be such a thing. To be able to build on that and describe the operating model and do transformation modeling, etc. And so it would be good, and that's the that's what I put on the other post-it, that we just could not discuss what are the services within the organization, but really just pick up these standards and just work from there. That would be a huge benefit for the organization. Although it's, I agree, a bit internally focused and a bit different from the other use cases.
So if I simply rephrase maybe your last point, it would be that starting from what exists to the maximal extent and building on top, or specifying it to the concrete needs that you face in the different organizations.
Yeah, sure. If we can cut a lot of discussions and waste a lot. Not waste, but save a lot of energy ourselves when we just can pick, look, here is the standard of how public services should be described. Let's just fill that in. It will take some time as well, but then we don't need to discuss how to describe it, and that will already be a big part. And then if it also happens to be used as a standard, for instance, with the Flemish government administrations to describe to the public what we are doing as a government agency, there's no way back. We just have to do that, and then we have something we can further build up on.
I think it's important. Yeah. And I don't know how the audience, the rest of the participants feel about that. I saw 2+1 in the chat. If you agree also with this proposition, it's not written in stone. It's not because you agree right now that we cannot come back to certain specific definitions, etc. But just to feel a bit also the temperature and how you feel about that. So I see, Thomas, you also agree with this proposition. So feel free to add a +1 in here, and then we'll see. But I think in general, that was also the basic idea of this exercise, right? Starting from what exists and looking at how it makes sense. I think the comment from Geert about the definitions is valid, and also can lead to changes at European level. Because if a definition is unclear, that's something we can also make better at European level by introducing the proper change request and by following up what's happening over there.
Sorry, and then I'll wrap up. I added another one beneath where, and it's maybe a bit more controversial, where the standards public service definition, and of course using it could be a basis for doing benchmarking, performance monitoring over organizations holistically. If everyone agrees on a certain standard, and then I think that it's not only describing what the service does, but also start adding metadata to it, like KPIs and so on. It would benefit a standard to do that and be more open in our reporting to the public on how we're doing as a public administration. But that's maybe something for the politicians to decide.
Yeah, and also challenging, meaning that it goes in the right direction, I think, but it's not only because you have an agreement on semantics that you can do that. But of course, if you don't have an agreement on semantics, it's way, or I would say, impossible to achieve this.
Yeah, and then I think the discussion in the chat on outputs and products and outcomes and impact to society also, because a KPI that is about how many permits have we issued is not that interesting in my. It's what happened, what was the impact for the given those permits issued. But it's a discussion on a whole other level, and.
But that's where you see the link between agreeing on what data means, and then using this data in order to produce value in different, thanks to analytics, thanks to people looking at this data.
Yes, let's produce data that can be reused afterwards in very different contexts.
Yeah. And I think it's also related to what Veronique said a bit earlier, where it's a two-way, where you can improve laws by, for example, someone has a new project of a government has a new project for law, and you would like to see, okay, but what will be the impact of this law if we apply it with those specific criteria? We are not there. Huh? I don't know any country who was there yet, but that's a bit the idea, that you have an impact assessment done before you actually pass the law, vote the law. But yeah, that's a great idea, I think. But
it's on our roadmap, but still
exactly.
some innovation to go, I think.
Indeed. On the machine-readable public service definitions could be used in chatbots and all. I think it's directly related with what we mentioned about the common systems and services that you can build as from the moment you have common definitions, common data. If I find it back, yeah, on the top here, I'll put it in the middle. Voilà. Okay, quite some others over here. So enable the reusability of service descriptions. A need for might require a need for harmonization between different actors, local, fairly similar, but described differently. Yeah, I don't know if who wrote this one.
I've wrote this one. Hi everyone.
Hey, Pascal.
Hey, Florian. Just to give some background for a better understanding of where this comes from. So I work for the Digitaal Vlaanderen on the topic of IPDC, which is a inter-administrative catalog of public service descriptions. And those public service descriptions are right now mainly on the federal and Flemish level, which are being reused by the local administrations, where they add their local specificalities of how they provide the service. But it's a one-directional flow. We don't receive that information back of how each local administrations rewrite or add certain services, which means that some services which are offered by local administrations that are not stemming from a federal or a Flemish level are described sometimes 300 times by all different public administrations, local administrations differently. So if we have a way of performing a harmonization exercise, we could help them in lightening the load and not having to describe each service again for their own. One of the use cases that I then put below, also in the orange circle, is, for example, the reusability of the single digital gateway translations. So right now, it would the current situation would mean that for the specific local services, each local administration will have to translate it themselves. But if there would be some kind of a harmonization exercise, that we would have generic fields, at least, of generic descriptions, we could provide the generic translations and help the local administrations with their workload.
Yeah, thanks, Basia. And I think in general, yeah, it's one of the objectives indeed. I think about a concrete case in the Netherlands where getting a visa is described at national level by the national authority, but it's also described by each local authority slightly differently with specific procedures, etc., to get actually the visa with different pricings, etc. So I think it's important to keep a balance between letting the competent authorities to have some flexibility in deciding how they want to offer a specific service, but also to try to put in common what is actually in common, the basic definition coming from the law, the translations, etc. Yeah. Svetlana. I see some activities in the chat. If you want to share it with the rest of the group or to describe it, feel free.
No, thank you. I'm feeling incredibly stupid, like for over 2 hours now. So I just don't dare to speak. But it was. I thought I just need to mention the capability map because we have a really good experience with that. But if somebody is interested, I can share it in some. Find me and I'll share it with you. But not in such a big group.
Sure. Don't feel stupid. I mean,
okay. I'm trying. I really try.
it's not like everyone is spending his full time on the semantics for a couple of years. Huh? Not everyone has the opportunity or the will to do that.
Okay. I hope that it'll pass till the next session or something like that. I'm optimistic.
I hope so. Yeah, let's continue then. Harvest information, yeah, great. We covered this one. Integrate sources of public service information as input for business rules, engines for search and recommendations. I think that's indeed something we discussed a bit about. I don't know if who wrote it. Was it you also, Patja?
Yeah, it was me. So it's related to the previous one, but this is rather to get that information when we have the service description. It includes also the criteria or the requirements to benefit from the service. As I said right now, the local descriptions, we don't get that information back. But if we want to build business rules engine and search and recommendation engines, we would need to somehow get that information from the local rules and requirements so that we can provide advice. And that would also require ideally a common data model to describe those conditions so that we can build easier engines that would almost automatically come up with those rules.
Yep. Yeah, valid point, and I fully agree with this. Good. Did I miss any? The build tools. Yeah, I find it very similar to what we have described already, so that's good. I see hearts being moved and popping up a bit everywhere. A last one here, and then we move to the prioritization. Adopt the FlexPub principle, participation, openness, collaboration. Who wants to describe it? Otherwise, in general, I agree with those principles. Huh? I think that's the whole idea of this exercise, is to have everyone participating, to be open and transparent in terms of discussions, and yeah, to collaborate towards common results, combining local levels, regional levels, federal levels. Yeah. Good. So you will see on the top right some hearts that you can simply click on and move towards the use cases that you are mostly interested in. Since there are quite some use cases, I would say that you can pick, yeah, you can still pick the 3 use cases that you find the most interesting. If there are really some use cases that you find a bit more interesting, you can put a 4th or 5th one. It doesn't harm, but yeah, try to stick to 3 if it works for you. So we'll also give you a bit of time to think about this. Still 1 minute. Good. So, what do we see? I see finding information about public services more easily. So really about searchability, understandability of the public services information. That's apparently something quite important. I see also quite some votes on the descriptions of the different steps. So the procedure to rather either coming from the user or coming from the providers. Also a lot for the fact of harvesting the information about the information about public organizations. Yeah, from the source. So really getting where the authentic source so that it's managed only once, if, to the extent possible. On the bottom right, I see the one of the last we discussed about how to, thanks to agreed information, common definitions, to build logic behind it, to automate certain decisions or to simply help decision making in general. Then, yeah, the proactive services, always a nice objective, and also some votes on this one. Let's see if we can derive some concrete information requirements or concepts behind it. Yeah, actually, I see harvest information is there twice, but yeah, that's not an issue. Good. So much love on this board. That's great. Veronique, you are counting, but I don't know what. Good. From there.
My neurotic self.
It's a good way of, yeah, it's not starting anymore, but I would say starting the day. Let's move to the last exercise for today. So brace yourself. From all the use cases we have defined, what are the information that you would need in order to, that you think is needed in order to get there? So feel free to put any information, and it doesn't matter the way you call it, because the idea is then to regroup what is similar and to come up with an initial proposition in the next workshop. It doesn't mean that everything that you write right now will be in the next workshop, but don't don't feel, if it's not the case, don't feel punished about that. It's simply because at a certain point we'll need to rationalize a bit. But right now, the idea is to get broad, so put all your ideas over there. And I see that you are already categorizing the stickers yourself, so thanks for that. If there is not enough place, yeah, I still see quite some at the bottom. Good. Shall we proceed? You can still continue if you want to still add additional terms. I will start from the top left. So top left. I see conditions and requirements. So yeah, what are the conditions in order to get the service? That's what I understand. And then I see in purple specific examples. For example, how much taxes do I have to pay? For me, I understand this one as a particular case for it's, for example, one example of public service. And the question I would have for this one is then what information do you need in order to provide such information? So what information is needed in order for an administration to be able to tell you this is the taxes you need to pay? And that's what we will be trying to model. But at the generic level, we will not specialize the model to the extent that we can model each public service separately, but rather the big categories, the big information for you.
Yes, of course. I think, but I just think, keeping in mind what was the discussion at the beginning of the session, is we need to keep in mind what the end goal is and what the end value is. What will the end users need, and what information do we need for that? And it is around what we need for that. And so the conditions and requirements are needed to make sure that we can answer these questions. So
yeah. And I guess it's the same for the pings on the cell phone, right?
Yes.
It's like, it's thanks to common information, what can you actually offer?
Yeah, when I saw business point of view, I just went really end user centric.
It's good. And well, of course, from there, from my perspective, or the team building proposing the initial model, it will be about thinking, okay, then what would be needed for that? And so there's an intermediary step, but that we will cover. Answering questions like, am I eligible for this service?
Same.
Which is very important. Something that everyone will ask him or herself when connecting to or searching for a specific service or subsidies, or am I eligible? Yeah. What are the exceptions to conditions? Good. Relevance to my own situation. I find it similar to the eligibility criteria, right?
Not quite. I would like to clarify. It's more, am I at the right place? I am in this situation. I need to build a veranda in Belleuil, for example. Do I need a permit? And am I at the right? Do I have the right info in front of my eyes? Maybe it's info about Brussels or Flanders, but I'm in Wallonia, so I need to be sure that I'm at the right place.
So where is the information I need from my context? Or yeah.
And if you build your veranda at the back of your house in Belleuil, you don't need a permit. Okay.
Anne, you raised your hand.
Yes, I wanted to say regarding the information for particular cases and am I eligible for this service, then in fact the information you could need from a citizen or from an organization is, for instance, their RISIF number or their kruispuntbank voor their ondernemingsnummer. So if we have all kind of informations linked to that person or organization ID, then you can automatically check some criteria. So if you go from the user need to which information do we need, I think the ID from the persons who ask something is really crucial.
Yeah. And I think the big question we will have at a certain point is where do we stop in making all the links towards the implementation level or towards the concrete services that are offered. But I think that's something we'll need to see along the way.
Isn't that what's evidence for? So like a really generic level, you need some evidence and data to check the criterion, and then you will need a specification for every single service probably. On the other hand, probably a lot of services are kind of similar. We noticed that for example, grants and taxes are kind of alike at some level. It's the opposite, but they have some similarities in there at the more generic level. So sometimes it's possible to make sure. Oh, also within taxes, taxes you have some generic way of doing things, although that one tax probably is something completely different than the other. But on a generic level, you can have some kind of afspraak on how to model it.
I think you're right. It's a matter of deciding what do we need to model and to dive into more and more, more and more operational cases to make sure that at a certain point you have described it fully. And here, right now, it's still quite abstract what we are describing, but of course, the idea is then to say, okay, after this exercise or as part of this exercise to a certain extent, to say for this domain, for this area of public services, how can we deliver it? What is required as information? Do I need the ID card of someone? In order to check his age or to check his local administration? I don't know, but those are the type of indeed evidence that is now falling under something abstract evidence, where it's now here on our input, and that later on we will need to dive into it to say, okay, how do we actually use that to refine and define further what we need? Yeah.
I think it's only important that that everyone should look at the concrete examples to make sure that what we model here at the generic level, that it fits. I do remember the discussion, the working groups on core criteria and core evidence at the European level, and we did that kind of exercise to just if we have,
because it's very abstract.
Yeah, but you need to make sure that you get it concrete also to make sure it fits.
Yeah. And we'll see to what extent we need to look into this model specifically for evidence, because there is a possibility that at this stage we only keep evidence, and then at a later stage we dive into it because it's an exercise also on its own. But to be seen how fast we can move, and there are also existing work, indeed, as you mentioned, for example, at European level. For information, I can also share with you some links. For CV, I can show you. Yep.
I'm not sure if this is the right moment to mention, but we did notice when we have some standards in place, and we do notice that it's needed to implement before before you actually finish the standardization process. We did a whole lot of working groups, and still after a year of implementing, you notice from, okay, we did think about it really hard with a really big bunch of people, but we still didn't got it wrong. So that's a possibility because it's abstract. So maybe we should think about how are we going to implement it and have some kind of feedback loop before a definite standard. It's just
yeah, and I think that's where the involvement of business people coming from different units, different departments, providing specific public services is very important. And so I remember, I think it was Svetlana who said, I feel stupid, please don't, because maybe right now it's very abstract, but the idea will be to make it more concrete for you to be able to make the link between this abstraction level and what you have in practice in your case. Going forward, because also time is running, I see organization identifiers. So how to identify uniquely and persistently organizations. That's what I understand. I will rephrase what I understand. If it's different, or if you want to add something, please interrupt them. A clickable URL to get extra information on related subjects. I understand that this clickable URL could be about either public service, either public organizations, or even other concepts. The contact information, contact channels in the sense that you can have different ways, different channels to get information via email, via phone, online chat, by going physically. So yeah, and that's directly related with contact points on the right side. Then difference between where can I get help and the competent authority. I think it's a valid point that we touched upon a bit earlier. Under public organization, what do we have? Because different kind of agents of people or organizations can have different roles in a public service. And I think that's what is important here, is to capture those different roles and the related information for each specific role. Then on the right side, we have the procedure and how this will probably be a tricky one, how to differentiate procedure from public service. There has been discussions for years about this at European level. I don't know if you will see the end of it. If what is important is that we can agree on something upon ourselves first. Opening hours related to probably the contact information, generic versus specific information fields. Yeah, and I think here we'll need to also say what is, let's see how we can differentiate both. An option that we see very often in modeling activities is simply to make it optional, to say, depending on your situation, you can decide to use this information or not. So you can decide whether it's relevant for you to define opening hours or not. Let's see what we need exactly. Still on the right side, about outputs, products, outcomes. What will be important there is to see whether they are different or not. I know at European level, we talk about outputs. We'll share definitions and make an initial proposition before the next workshop, the next webinar. What will be important for you to position yourselves compared to that, see, does it fit my needs? And then the capabilities needed for delivering the service. I don't know who wrote this one, and if we can describe briefly what we understand by capabilities.
That'll be me again. Yeah. It's again an internal business architecture perspective. Capabilities, I mean, to what is needed to deliver services in terms of people, processes, technology, etc. So again, it goes back to my previous intervention that it helps to have a stable description of what you're doing, for instance, based on services, to build further on that. If we're doing this, or this is our ambition, because the service catalog, in my view, could contain things that we still need to do or that we might be doing, something that you might not publish yet, but could be also an instrument for the business. This is what we're good at. This is what we still need to do. And then from an internal perspective, you could work with that to what roadmap do we have to take? What do we have to implement in terms of organization, people, processes, tools, etc.
Yep. And I see also a link with what Veronique was describing before, in terms of here maybe it will be still abstract, or start from what we know and then dive into specific aspects that that are not yet there, but that we could define as well, towards more and more implementation levels where we can really reuse this information specifically.
Sure.
Yeah. The responsibilities, process ownership, yeah, it covers different terms here. The process, I see it related to the procedure. The responsibilities, maybe more to, or was it described? To the role, yeah, here, to the role an organization has, related also to discussion about, yeah, voilà, competent authority. Good. Then how can a certain service be orchestrated with other services? Yeah, so how do we split services? And this may vary between administrations or between public organizations as well. Huh? But do you need a previous service in order to get the following one? And for each you have specific outputs, or is this all part of one overarching public service? That's something we can also see how to use it in practice.
But I won't use the term split. I'll keep it more positive and talk in terms of composability. And that's why I added business point of view, because as ITers, we're becoming proficient in composing stuff on the IT level. But we see that at the business level, composing things is still a very big mind switch to make. The not invented here reflex comes up very often, and composing stuff from what is already there is something we should strive for as well. And it needs, I think, on the technical level, depending on your maturity, of course, IT maturity, we're taking big steps there as already. But on the business level, it's still difficult, or we need to engage them to also think about composability.
Yep.
And imagine composing over different levels of authority. Imagine doing that. That's even.
Yeah. So for you, it's one step after the moment you can combine the services, or combine in terms of exchange and collect information about the services into one place and see how are they related, how can they be composed, or to each other.
Mm. So it's for those who are not thinking, the building blocks that we have at Vlaamse Overheid, for instance, it's even a step further. It's really composable business logic that can be assembled. There are some examples already, but it's there's work to engage the business to see the benefits and how to do that, and how to define then services to make that happen. Let's not make a priority of this.
Yeah, but it's interesting, and also to link with use cases. Huh? And Veronique, I see your question in the chat. Are we also looking at instantiations of public services? I would say yes, as for example purposes, to make it tangible, but the idea is still to agree first on something across sectors, across services that can be applied to any service.
Yeah, but any service probably, every service probably will have an instantiation in real life at some point. So you need to have a generic way of modeling that.
Exactly.
How is a instantiation related to to the concept?
Yeah. So instantiation is for everyone. I don't know if because it's a bit also specific to semantics a bit. Is the fact of finding concrete examples of that fits, finding concrete examples, concrete cases that fit within certain terms. Yeah, an instantiation of a live event is getting married. The example I gave earlier. No.
Yeah, we use it, for example, you have a concept of some kind of road traffic regulation. So you can only have drive 30 in certain zones. That's a concept that's somewhere, and then you have a specific implementation in this village. You can only drive 30 because it's decided upon. So that's the two things. The one is the idea, and the other one is concrete at one place.
How is it applied?
Yeah, where it is applied. Yeah, and it is a really concrete thing. Someone or somewhere this rule is implemented.
And that's how you test whether your model actually works. Good. Continuing, I see a lot in the middle about classifications, code lists. We talk sometimes about control vocabularies, all those kind of synonyms for list of terms that are useful, for example, to describe domains, sectors, or sectors, client guidance. Which sectors is your public body serving? Domains, we covered that already here. And here, define the Humban's service for complaints or appeal instance. Probably this is not part of classifications. It's more about, wait, I saw it before. Yeah, the FAQ, attention points, exceptions.
Ik zal direct zien met mijn agenda's. Je regarde ik moet bij de kinesist zijn om 4:30.
Compliance with standards used in the government sector. So I understand that this is not directly a concept we need to, or information we need to directly include, but more looking at the archival sector and see what kind of standards they use and to make sure that we comply with it. I don't know who wrote this, but for the last part of the meeting, it's important today just to, if you have ideas of links or standards in this sector, to share them with us. Contextual and semantic support. I don't know who wrote this one.
That's fine. In order to get this working, it's relevant to have some help desk, to have some service desk where you can go with your questions and to have the surrounding service management. In my experience, many developers, many business analysts don't have the baggage to implement this on a correct base. So it's crucial to have someone to go to when you have questions. How do I cope with this definition? How do I implement this? And how do I get this working in my situation?
Yeah, valid point.
It's not really information in this case, but it's well a crucial fact that you can go somewhere with your questions.
Yeah, probably something also for ICEG to think about. Next to the model, at a certain point, if you want it to be reused, you need to think about, okay, how can we support public organizations business owners to start doing it.
Yes,
yep.
That's my point a bit.
And was it you also about the SLA and response time, Thomas?
No, that's not mine.
That's someone else. But yeah, okay.
Probably it was. Oh.
Jan, maybe it was you. No. Okay. But response time is something that can be a concept on its own. Are there specific responses or timings by law that you need to respect in order to deliver a service? So that's a concept that we could imagine within the model. We won't define SLAs as part of the model itself. I think that's not the idea if it was not clear nowadays. But from the model, you should be able also to, in defining your SLAs, to feed it certain information within the model itself. I think that's.
I could imagine that it's kind of crucial when you plan on using a catalog of public services in your own system. You can't afford to wait 20 seconds for it to load. So
yeah,
you have to know what the response time, expected response time is in certain usage of a certain catalog of public services, for example. So you could add it to metadata, I guess, of your solution you're building.
Exactly, and there we need to see, to what level of details do we go? Yes. Do we define authentication? Do we define, from a technical point of view, all the terms needed, or do we leave that for a second layer model that will be put in practice in terms of implementation for a specific system to be created? So
it's more technical interoperability level.
Yeah, I think that's the limit one that we are talking about, indeed. Yeah, and something we see a lot if some of you follow the discussions for the single digital gateway regulation, where there are existing core models like the ones described earlier today that are now put in practice for a specific implementation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, technical support. I think it's directly related with.
Yes.
Yeah. Information about process flows. There were processes above before, so I understand it's related to this one. Target user groups. Yeah, valid point. Who are my users? How can I define them? Are they specific? Good. The languages of the service, in which language is the service provided, language of the public organization, language of specific channels. For example, the service is by default provided in 2 languages, but through phone or through in this web page, maybe you can find also information in other languages. Yeah, good. The FAQ, yeah, that we covered. The reuse conditions and licenses. I don't know who wrote this one and how to understand it exactly.
I did. I wrote it down because there's a lot of information coming to the field concerning private sector information and so on, and it's very important for the reusers to know which are the conditions and licenses they have to apply to reuse the content that the government is delivering them.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, I understand it's also touching specific aspects. So to be seen to what level we enter with that also in the technical interoperability layer, meaning that you can quickly get into questions about what's the sensitivity of the information. Is it personal information? Here about public services, very often there, at a certain point, there is personal information handled. And do we want to model this directly, or do we leave that also to specific public services because it differs? To be discussed. I see it as an important step, but to be seen if we can do that immediately. So probably not as a starting point. I don't know, Pascal, what you think?
For instance, at the Flemish government, there are some type licenses available. You can refer to Creative Commons licenses and other licenses like that, who have a persistent identifier. So it can be quite useful for reusers to have knowledge of such kind of information.
Yeah, indeed. And in itself, the model and everything that is created will have a specific license. But of course, within the model, I think it's also important to we can also see how to include a license condition. Yeah. The governance rules. So I understand this is on top of the model itself, but more related to the support provided, but also how to start applying it. It could be a user guideline or specific requirements on how to implement this model. Classifications, yeah. Change events, something that is part of the core public organization vocabulary, yeah. The location of the competent authority delivering the service, or in which area can you get this service, or the location of a specific public organization, yeah. The link to the online procedure that we discussed about. Info about freshness, yeah, the latest update of the information or when the information was verified, yeah. A feedback mechanism, to be seen what we understand exactly with feedback, or what we would like to model. Like, is it a channel that we need to define, or is it really defining how the feedback can be provided, what kind of information is behind, and then maybe it's a specific model only for feedback. Decisions and regulations, so the link with the legal texts, yeah. And linking products ID to show linear hierarchy between services, yeah. So linking services between each others, I think that's also related to what was referred before with the composability of a service. I think that's where this is quite important. Yeah, certification, is this info legit? Yeah.
It's legitimate. So is this a fraud? Okay. We don't have use cases in our perimeter, but I've heard from French, for example, that some frauders they built bogus public service websites with near plausible information that leads users to understand that they can click on the link and get robbed.
Yeah. So how to identify, for example, an authentic website of a public organization?
Yes.
That would be an example. Yeah.
Yes. And it's important because whenever we will start to exchange information, and so we need to kind of provide some kind of certification and a link to where the user can go and check that the information is authentic and has not been altered in the process of the exchange if the publisher is not the owner of the information.
Yep.
So it's important.
Yeah, and I would be interested in knowing how public organizations are doing it today, making sure that visitors can know that the information on the website is authentic or that they are on the right website, besides looking at the domain of the URL or I don't know, and on the layout, etc. But yeah, I propose not to discuss that in detail right now, but we can definitely dive into it further on in the discussions. Good. Thanks a lot for all the inputs. Yeah, quite impressive. All the information we got already in those 3 hours. With that, I propose also to quickly go through useful sources that you are aware of, that you mentioned today, and to share it in the chat. As mentioned earlier, existing sources that we will be definitely looking at includes core public vocabularies at European level, how those core public vocabularies were further defined at Flemish, Walloon level. If you have other models similar to those, feel free to share them. There are also interesting ontology standards by, for example, W3C. If you look at public organization and how it is defined at European level, it's directly pointing to also existing standards like the organization ontology, the registered organization vocabulary, etc. So things we are aware of and will be looking at as well. Again, if you see that we are missing something, or if you have other sources, feel free to share them. Yeah, I see, Johan, you mentioned, I don't know how to pronounce it, but Rick O.
It's records in context and the ontology. It's a new standard being developed in the archival sector based on linked data. For us, it's important because we are working at a prototype for using it into the Belgian state archives. And for us, it's important that that there is a compliance between the different standards if we are talking about archiving on the long term of the data of the generated data.
Yep.
So there has to be we have to see if the elements from RIC are there and do possible mapping and so on.
Yeah, and would it happen that you have already a link to the model or something that is publicly available or that you can share via email?
Yes, I can share it.
Right. Because from experience, when you look for the abbreviation online, sometimes it's really hard to get your hands on the actual information. Depends where it is, but only searching, for example, on GitHub, you can have many similar abbreviations for different things. Anne, you raised also your hand.
Yeah, I already switched to the chat. For libraries, there's also an ISO standard to identify them, the ISIL code. KBR is a registration agency for it, but I've got the impression that it's, no, I don't have the impression, I know that it's only used in Flanders and not so much so. I wonder, does it make any sense to continue updating our information, our ISIL database, if nobody is using it? If there are other standards in use for interoperability, for the loan between libraries, then it should be useful as well. So basically, we are a registration agency for an ISO code to identify libraries, but it's only used in Flanders, and I'm not sure if it's systematically used or not. In Wallonia, and in any case, they don't use it. They do use a global location number. Yep. To identify organizations.
Please share it, and we'll see. And that can be a discussion for GitHub issue, for example, where we'll make a proposition, and from there we'll collect also the inputs on this specific aspect on how
it's
to
really
identify.
Specific, so my apologies.
Yeah, but still relevant. Yeah. So I continue. If you have other inputs, such as the one of Anne, Pascal, Johan, feel free to share them in the chat. Please try to provide as much as possible the link, or if you don't have it immediately, it can be also via email afterwards. Yeah, let's move quickly to the next steps. So this is, in a nutshell, the timeline that we are proposing now. Normally, I think you have already received, for quite some of you, a link to from Evelyn, a link to the registration page, where you can find the different dates and how to register if you are interested, so that we capture a bit also who is participating in which workshops. Next one, very important, is on the 12th of July. So try to book the date. We know that it's summertime. It will be the same for the 12th of August. Everyone is taking holidays, so yeah, we'll. But that's also why we are a big group of people. It's to make sure that all voices can be heard. And then the idea is we will run now through approximately 4 webinars. And after the 4th, we will start normally a public review, where basically you will have approximately 2 months to really dive into the details of the final proposal. And from there, the idea is that this can be from the end of the public review, that the model proposed can be agreed by all parties and proposed for as a standard at a Belgian level. What are the concrete next steps now? If you know about people that were not here today, but that should be involved, please get in touch with them and share the registration link with them. The idea is not to be 300 people in the webinars. That could be an overkill, but if it is needed, fine. Huh? As mentioned earlier, I hope it's clear now, we need a mix of people with semantic knowledge or a background in IT architecture, for example, and people with actually more business knowledge. What are the use cases that I see? How is my public service described today, etc. So the more the merrier. And yeah, the idea is that as after this workshop, the workshop of today, we process the input of the brainstorming exercise we had, and we make an initial proposition. As mentioned, we'll start from existing standards and see how can this be applied with all the information we detected, identified already. We will also circulate a webinar report. If you have feedback about it, feel free to share. And then from there, we'll share the input, and this will be the input for the first thematic workshop or webinar on the 12th of July. And at any time, you can share your feedback or further information via email, or ideally via GitHub. There's a link over here. I will already share it in the chat, but a second. Yeah, I will share it in the chat, and we will create together with ICEG a specific repository for this exercise, so that it's clear where the documentation is. And the idea, if for the ones that do not know GitHub, I'll show you. So this is GitHub. You can create an account for free. And so you will have a specific repository from here, where, so it will be a folder. And from this folder, you will be able to click on issues. And from there, you will be able, for example, to create new issues. And you will also be able to watch the activities on the issues, so that if you have specific comments on the proposition made and you can share it via a new issue or simply by answering an existing issue, and you can know when someone answered your issues or etc. Let me go back to the slides. Yeah. So the email addresses, we'll share them via the slides, but for now, I'm not there, but I will be next time. I'm getting my email address set up as well. Any questions? That's for how to watch GitHub issues. So any further questions on this? Otherwise, I'm 2 minutes late. Sorry for that. We can wrap up for today. I hope the context and objectives of this work are clear for everyone now. I assume it's still a bit can be still a bit abstract for certain people. And thanks a lot for the participation. 3 hours is a long webinar. Initially, I didn't think we would need the 3 hours, but voila, that's thanks to all your good inputs. And then we'll be in touch. Thanks a lot, and enjoy the rest of the day. Enjoy lunch for those who are going now. Talk to you all.
Dankjewel.
Okay, bye.
Tot de volgende.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.